What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MI Gardener channel. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about grass. How to make sure that grass is safe to use in the garden, and what to do if you do get grass that grows in your garden, and what could have caused it. This is something that comes up very frequently in our comment section and our inbox from concerned gardeners that would like to use grass in their garden, but are concerned about spreading weeds in their garden, or they are concerned gardeners that used grass in their garden and got weeds in their garden. And so I just want to touch on this topic because I think grass is a very underutilized resource, one that we've used in our garden with success for many years, but also have had our fair share of run-ins with some weed outbreaks and what we've done to control them as well as prevent them. And so that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode because, like I said, I think it's just such an underutilized resource, and one that I see out at the road in those paper yard waste bags so frequently that just gets sent either to a landfill or to a municipal composting facility that then you turn around and buy the compost when you could have just processed it right on site and used it to benefit your garden and your family. Now, nobody likes weeds, and they're very easy to have in the garden, and every gardener will come across weeds at some point in their life, but it's what we do about them or how we prevent them that really makes our gardening life a lot easier. As you can see, I've got some weeds in this bed here. Now, this bed had some carrots, it also had some lettuce and some spinach, and I pulled the carrots out about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was waiting for the season to cool just a little bit for me to plant some radishes. Now, in the process, I applied a grass mulch to this soil to make sure that it was protected so that the soil quality stayed optimum. However, in doing that, as you can see, I spread some grass and I grew some grass that is now kind of threatening to overtake this garden bed. Now, normally people would begin freaking out and they would panic and burn their whole garden bed down. Don't do that. It's very simple to eradicate. Now, I'm going to show you how. I'm going to just talk about the different ways that I use to eradicate the grass from this bed, but I'm also going to go into detail as to how I got it. And in that process, I'm going to also explain how grass can be made safe to use in the garden, because we've used grass clippings for 4, 6, 8 years. I don't even know how long we've been using grass clippings in the garden, but ever since pretty much I've started gardening, I've been using grass as a mulch, as compost in my core gardening beds. I've been using that, and it's a very safe and effective way to grow plants. You don't have to have a weed outbreak. It's just when you make a mistake is when you get a weed outbreak. So that's what we're going to talk about. So how did this grass first start? Well, it started one of two ways. One, I either got some tainted grass that had some grass seed in it. That's the first way. I don't believe that to be the cause, but it can be. Grass seed comes very readily on stalks like this. Some are not this evident. This is very plumy and obvious. You might have just a little bit of grass that is very inconspicuous. It could be just a small little tuft of grass seed, because grass seed grass grows in a variety of different shapes and sizes, and depending on the variety of grass, some are more obvious like this, some are way more inconspicuous like Kentucky bluegrass, or like your more domesticated grasses that don't form these big giant seed stalks like this. This is probably something more like a catgrass, or not a catgrass, like a sawgrass or Bermuda grass or tiger grass. Very, very common grasses in this area, but they're much more obvious with their seed stalks. Regardless, this could have came from some grass seed, but the most suspected cause is from plant material. Now, plant material is a very common cause of grass outbreaks because of what we call propagation. Propagation is anytime you take plant material and it roots. You can do this with things like basil, tomatoes, pretty much any vining crop. You can do this with almost any plant material at all. Some things just propagate better than others. And take, for instance, this purslane, which is, I'm kind of letting it take over my bed over here because we like to eat it, but this propagates extremely easy. All you need to do is just take this little bit of plant material, or even something as small as this, or even as small as this, believe it or not. No leaves are even needed. As long as this material stays on the soil and the conditions are favorable, it stays nice and cool, it stays nice and damp, the plant material stays nice and green and water rich. This will actually set roots and begin growing. That is how things like purslane can spread very quickly. But also things like creeping Charlie, things like milk thistle, things like sow thistle, very invasive. Also things like grass can do this. Believe it or not, grass can propagate from a tiny little grass cutting if it's the right type of grass. So as you can see here, I've got some grass sprouting up, and this is sprouting up from plant material. And how I know that is because of the type of grass that it is. This grass is a type of sawgrass, and it grows up when you have tiny bits of plant material that land in the soil. Now, how I know that is because of this formation right here. This formation tells me that this was grown from a cut from a little bit of plant material, because all it takes is for you to have this little bit of plant material here, and let's say you mowed the grass and it was very long, the grass was very long, and you didn't get just the blades of grass. Normally if you cut your grass very frequently, you get just the blades. The blades are very safe, they cannot propagate. But if you get any of this stem material, any of this main stem material, it could be this, it could be this, it could be that, it could be that. You do not need the roots to propagate. And how I can tell you that is because if you look at these bits of grass right here, these little bits of grass can be divided off from this main parent plant. And you can see, if I bring you guys in close, you can see where they are growing little root fibers. Now you might not be able to see them up close, but if I had a macro lens, you can see there are little fuzzes on those kind of fuzzies. Those roots will grow and mature if they are left to their own devices. That applies to any part of this grass right here. And it applies to things like Bermuda grass, sawgrass, tiger grass. A lot of your grasses, all you need is a little bit of this stem to remain woody, or to remain green, not woody, but green and moisture rich, and it will grow roots wherever it sets on the soil. So yes, I have grass in my garden beds, but am I freaking out? No. And that's because there's things that I can do to make sure that I control the outbreak and get myself back to a place where I was before the grass outbreak occurred. And how I can do that is through a couple ways. The first way is by persistently weeding. Now this is not fun, and I don't find weeding to be something that I enjoy doing. That's why I tend to grow the way that I grow. It's because the methods that I use to grow actually suppress weeds and make a lot less weeding for me to do. But anytime I have a bed left bare like this that then has a weed problem, I have to go back and I have to persistently weed. And as long as I weed for about 2 or 3 weeks, anything that pops up at all, the smallest little thing, you pull it out, you get it taken care of as soon as it sprouts, and that ensures that over time you're going to be left with pretty much a weed-free bed, 99.9% weed-free bed, because as soon as you water the bed, you let anything else grow, you pull it out, you water it, you pull it out. There can only be so much growing, plant material that can grow, whether it's seeds or propagatable material like some plant stems or anything like that can grow, that exists in this soil. It'll sprout after 3 weeks, and if it doesn't, it wasn't ever going to sprout. Now the second way that you can control an outbreak is by solarizing your bed. This is a very effective way of controlling the outbreak, but it has some downsides. Solarizing is the process of taking a tarp and applying it to your garden bed for 2 to 3 months. And any plant material that's growing, any seeds that might grow, they're all smothered out, because when they grow into a tarp that blocks the sun. And because it's blocking the sun, the plants can't photosynthesize, and therefore they die. And when they die, they just get turned back into organic material, and they end up feeding your garden over time, which is a benefit. But the downside is that it doesn't allow you to plant in the garden beds because it's being covered by a tarp. So you can't use the space. I like to solarize my beds if I do have a small outbreak in fall or spring when I'm not planning on planting anything in those beds. If I'm gonna leave the space bare anyways, I'm going to put a tarp over it to ensure that anything that is growing or might grow is smothered out. The other downside to that is anytime you heat up the soil, you also do kill some soil microbes and beneficial bacteria and fungi. But it's a very easy fix because all you have to do is take some nice, clean, finished compost or some worm castings a nice organic fertilizer that has, that's rich in beneficial bacteria and fungi. You apply it to your garden beds, and you should be back to where you started, but just minus some lost time. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is making sure that your grass is safe to use in the garden. How do you know that your grass is safe to use in the garden? Well, the first way is by using weed-free material. If I look out and I'm mowing my grass, I will actually frame out, or I'll map out the area that I plan on using for grass mulch. I'll walk that thoroughly, and I'll systematically look for any form of foreign grass or like weedy grass that's not domestic and really weak, something like a sawgrass or a Bermuda grass or tiger grass, something like that might propagate very easily from plant material. I'll look for those things. I'll look for things like plantains. I'll look for things like creeping Charlie. I'll look for things like dandelions and sow thistle and very invasive plants that can spread very easily. I'll look for those things, because if I see those things, what I'll do is I'll either avoid them entirely, or I'll take a little orange flag that they use to mark where like water lines are or electric lines. I'll stick those in the ground, and I'll just mow around the flags, therefore missing the weeds. Now, that's the first way. The second way is by actually solarizing the material. Now, what you can do is you can take all the material that you plan on using as a mulch, and you can sit it out in the sun on a tarp or in your driveway for 2 or 3 weeks. And what that does is it bakes any material, because the only way that plant material could propagate is if it's water rich and green. As long as it's dead and dying, it can't propagate. It does not have enough energy to set roots and grow. So by setting it outside, you're gonna have nice brittle, dead grass material. It won't be green and water rich, but it'll still act just the same as if it was green, only minus the risk of it spreading in your garden. That's the second way. It does take some time. It does look a little unsightly, but it does work very well. So that's the second way. And then the third way is by burying it deeply. By burying plant material more than 10 inches deep. So if you take 10 inches or 11 inches, 12 inches, 14 inches, 20 inches deep, by burying it very deeply, you're going to ensure that any plant material that could grow is going to be killed off, because it just does not have enough energy. Even the strongest weed on earth cannot grow up through a foot of soil. It just can't. And so by burying it very deeply, it's going to ensure that that it really does not become a problem. So those are 3 ways to make sure that the grass you're using is safe. It can be used safely. I have used it safely. And just because I have a small weed outbreak does not mean that that I'm panicking. I have those methods. I no doubt will get this under control. I no doubt will have radishes growing within 3 weeks. I no doubt will have this bed ready to use, and it'll be growing more food for me. It just was a small mistake that I made because I was not paying attention, and that's all it takes, is just not paying attention for that split second, and it's like finding a needle in a haystack. It only takes a tiny few little twigs of that invasive weed to end up in your grass for it to be considered tainted grass and ruin your day. Luckily, I did not apply it to all my beds, because all my beds were growing at the time. This was the only one that I was using to cover, and I realized really quickly that I had a problem. So catching it early, being proactive, and avoiding it all entirely in the first place is some good ways to make sure you don't have an outbreak. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I really do hope that you use grass in your garden. It is such a beneficial resource. It is something that is free, it is abundant, and it is something that can really help you out as a gardener if used correctly. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments box below. And as always, this is Luke from the My Gardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home. And we'll catch you all later. See ya. Bye.